Welcome to 18th Century Cooking. I'm your host, John Townsend. Today we're going to be cooking something simple, something that's common to us, pancakes, but with a historic twist. Thanks for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century. So today's recipe is from the lady's assistant, Charlotte Mason. This is 1777, and this is an English cookbook. But the title of the recipe is New England Pancakes. So that's our weird hint today. Why is it called New England Pancakes? Let's look at the recipe itself. A pint of cream, 5 spoonfuls of flour, 7 eggs, leave out 3 whites, a little salt, fry them thin in fresh butter, lay 7 or 8 in a dish, strew butter and cinnamon between. So this is a really interesting recipe in that it's in a bunch of other pancake recipes. There's 7 or 8 pancake recipes in this particular cookbook. If we want to go digging deeper in on New England pancakes, we could pick up something like American Cookery. This is a New England cookbook from 1796. No pancakes at all in this particular cookbook. So sometimes we got to go to another hint for exactly what New England pancakes were like. So let's get started on this one. I've got all the ingredients here. We've got flour, obviously. I've got a pint of cream. We've also got a little bit of salt. Other than that, we just need the ingredients for the sort of topping that goes in between. So a little bit of ground up sugar, and we've got some cinnamon, and of course, what are we going to cook these in? I'm going to cook these in just a little bit of butter. And we'll need about 7 eggs for this recipe. So let's get started putting this together. Probably the simplest way is not the order that the recipe is in, but we're going to start with the eggs because those take the separating, and that's the most efficient way to deal with this. First, we need just 3 yolks. And I'm going to go ahead and take the number of eggs down to 6 because our eggs are undoubtedly much bigger than their eggs were in that time period. So to balance that out, you could even go all the way down to 4 or 5. Now we just need 3 whole eggs. Now let's whisk these up with our birch twig whisk. So next let's add in our cream. And we can whisk this up till we get that all incorporated. Doesn't take that long. This looks really good. Now we can start to add in our dry ingredients. And we don't have very many dry ingredients. I'm going to start off with our salt here. And this is kind of a big recipe, so I'm going to put a full teaspoon of salt in there. Now we need the flour. We need 5 spoonfuls of flour. And this is another one of those fun parts of the recipe where you say 5 spoonfuls. What do you mean 5 spoonfuls? Think of it as a cooking spoonful, right? So that's what we're going to shoot for. It might be a tablespoon, more or less, but that's what we're going to shoot for here. And also I whisk these in a little bit at a time. I'm not just dumping the whole amount in there so that I can whisk it in and get it nice and smooth, because we don't want it to be lumpy. If it's lumpy, we just have to keep whisking it until we get it smooth. It's always helpful when we're in the flour part, we're not sure exactly how much. Really, you're just shooting for consistency, right? Is this a pancake batter consistency? Yes or no? This is probably a runnier, and some of these 18th century pancakes are definitely runnier than what we would think of as a typical American pancake today. And so you want it to be a little thinner than that. And also, what's missing from a modern pancake recipe, this doesn't have any leavening. It doesn't have any chemical leavening like baking soda, baking powder, none of that is in here. So these make thin, flat pancakes. Today we might call them crepes, but that's the kind of typical pancake from the 18th century. I'm gonna let this batter rest just a little bit, and I'm gonna get the fire ready and the pan hot. we go. Our pancakes, they're ready to eat. I made a giant pile just for the camera so you can see those. But I'm gonna eat these other ones. They didn't turn out quite so pretty here, but I've got them on the side. Now, obviously, this is an English woman's take on a New England pancake, isn't it? Because what's missing? Obviously, a New England pancake, it's gonna be smothered in maple syrup, but they didn't have the maple syrup in England, so they used what they thought was the equivalent: sugar, cinnamon. It's probably still gonna be really good, isn't it? So let's try this one out. Well, you know what? It ends up being dry. I expect maple syrup, don't I? I expect that extra liquid in here and making it nice and moist. Now these turned out nice and fine. I didn't overcook them, which is easy to do with these little thin pancakes. So I cooked them. It took a little while, but they're very, very tender. Not quite as bready as our, modern pancakes might be today. So I really enjoy their texture. The cinnamon and the sugar is definitely a different take. A standard English take would be, at least in the 18th century, would be the sugar and lemon juice on top. So the cinnamon definitely is a little different. But again, boy, if I had my druthers, I would be putting some maple syrup on these. Or you could, if you want to go in a kind of a mix, you would put on a pudding sauce, wouldn't you? With the butter melted, with sugar, and a little wine in there. Oh, it would make a wonderful substitute for maple syrup. So good. This reminds me of a recipe in the same cookbook, which is the pepper pot recipe. Now that's a West Indian recipe that's translated into the English, and it's definitely an English take. This is an English take on New England pancakes, not exactly like really you would have if you were in New England. Same way with the pepper pot. Such a fun recipe, a simple recipe, an easy to do one. It's great to try this one out. You can try it out with the cinnamon sugar. You'll love it. It definitely, the takeaway on this is watching what happens when those different colonial foods come back to the mother country and how they get reinterpreted, changed around, and how things move from one region to another. So it's a real interesting recipe and a real interesting cookbook for that specific idea. If you're interested in historical cookbooks, make sure to check out our website. We've got dozens and dozens of historical cookbooks from the 18th century. Thank you so much for coming along today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.